Hello. Over these next few videos, we'll be looking at what is Node.js. This video is an introductory, kind of looking at Node.js at the summary level. And to really sum it up in a nutshell, Node.js is JavaScript on the server. Now, to explain what is JavaScript on the server, what is JavaScript on the browser or on the client? So let's look at the way JavaScript has traditionally been used. So here we have a client-server relationship. So this is your browser, this is a server that's serving the web pages. So your browser client would send a request to the web server. Now the web server would normally have a folder in it, which is often called the public folder, which would contain JavaScript files that are to be processed on the browser. It would also contain other what's called static files, things like HTML files, CSS files, images, anything that basically is going to be sent back from the server to the client as is. It's called static. Another reason for calling it, why people call it a public folder, is because all of these files that are stored there can be viewed by people via their browser through things like Chrome developer tools. So that's why it's called public. So the request is made, the JavaScript files in the public folder are then sent back to the client, and then those JavaScript files will then be processed on the client by a JavaScript engine. Now, for example, on Chrome, the JavaScript engine is called the V8 engine. Now, so like I said, the JavaScript file will be processed on the client by this JavaScript engine, Chrome V8 engine in the case of Chrome. However, when we look at Node.js, that's JavaScript on the server. So if I'm using Node.js, I'm going to have another folder here. For simplicity's sake, let's just call it backend, for example, folder. Now this backend folder here is also going to have JavaScript files in, but these JavaScript files are going to be Node JavaScript files. These are going to be files that are to be processed on the server, not processed on the client. Now what these files will do then, it allows us to do dynamic responses back to the client based on things like the time of day or the user's name or anything else that was passed through on the request. So now these JavaScript files are more akin to something like files Java or PHP or C#, these other types of back-end programming languages that we're familiar with. So again, so this is JavaScript files that are processed on the server and allow us to do dynamic responses back to the client. So interesting thing though, another thing about Node.js, it's not just similar to these programming languages like PHP, Java, and C#. To give you an example, let's look at something that you may be familiar with, which is a lamp stack. Now the lamp stack is a very, very popular way of running servers. It's basically using a Linux operating system, an Apache server, a MySQL database, and PHP, as we mentioned earlier, for your server-side logic. Now, we've already mentioned that these Node files in here are similar to PHP, the P in lamp. However, Node is also used to actually create the server itself, which is the A of the lamp stack. So Apache. So as well as having this code to interpret requests, do server-side logic, and then send back responses, dynamic responses, Node can also be used to replace Apache and actually create the server itself, to actually listen for requests and transmit responses as a server like Apache does. So for example, I would have a file in here, and again, this is quite often called this, server.js. Now this server.js file, the JavaScript file again, but this is actually creating the server itself. So you can see Node kind of really has two components to it. It has the server-side logic that is run upon requests, similar to what PHP, etc. does, but it can also be used to build the server itself. Now that gives us a great amount of flexibility in building our server, and really there's a term called closer to the metal. You're actually programming closer to the metal because you're actually programming and building the server itself with Node.js. So I hope that gives a good overview of Node.js and how it is JavaScript on the server. In the next video, we'll be going into more details about the structure of Node.js.